Hello and welcome to Beyond Technique, brought to you by Platypod, Photofocus, and Skip Cohen University. This is Shamira Young, and I'm joined by my co-host and creative collaborator, Skip Cohen.
Creative collaborator.
Yes,
wow.
Very fitting.
Well, here I am. Hey, Shamira. It's my Hey Shamira minute here.
Hey, Skip.
Yeah, I don't know if you've had a chance to use them yet, but I'm playing with the two new goosenecks that Platypod came out with. And I am blown away by the versatility. I've got a Platypod Max setup with a Panasonic G9 and the 30 millimeter macro lens. And with those two goosenecks, I've got two Lytra torches on either end. And I'm not suggesting that this is for award-winning macro photography, but when you're looking for a setup that gives you the foundation to be outrageously creative, it's instant macro. I've got it set up permanently. I'm going to actually switch the camera out because I use the G9 for a lot of other things that I like to photograph. But having that set up and being able to take, it's perfect for people that are selling things on eBay, for example, or you're sending something to a company because you've got a question on how something goes together and you're trying to duplicate the part or show something, and you want to show more than what you can do on a cell phone. Or I'm really excited. I want to start to try it with some flowers and things. I'm not going to suggest I'm a Don Komarechka when it comes to macro or close up, but it's just such a great product and it's so easy.
You know, and that's what's so cool about it. I mean, it's creative, it's simple, it's fun, it lets you explore and try new things without being complicated. So, and I mean, that's what keeps our passion alive as photographers. So that is very, very cool, very exciting.
Well, and just to be able, for a knucklehead like me, to be able to start to experiment and play in macro and be able to do it with all that control, it just becomes phenomenal. And those Lytra torches in combination with the gooseneck are just such a perfect combination for doing things a little differently and capturing images that you really want to be proud of.
The dynamic duo, absolutely.
So listen, we've got a very creative collaborator with us this morning. We've got Matthew Jordan Smith joining us on this new episode, and I'm going to do a very brief intro because if I take and talk about everything I know about his background, we're not going to have time for a podcast. So Matthew's best known for his commercial editorial style of portraiture, especially in beauty photography, but he's an artist, he's an author, he's an educator, and he's been an inspiration and a good buddy to so many of us over the years. Now, the fun of today's Beyond Technique podcast is that we're stepping a little outside the box. Matthew's living in Japan these days, and we want to talk a little bit about photography as the universal language, the challenge of being an artist in another country, and the importance of education and relationship building to raise the bar on your skill set. Hey, buddy. Welcome to Beyond Technique.
How you doing, guys? That's good being here.
Hey, Matthew.
We should let everybody know that because, let's see, Matthew, what time is it now for you?
It's only 9:20 here, 9:20 p.m.
Oh, that's not too bad. All right. Well, it's 8:20 here, so we're having fun. We're in the morning, just starting our day, and Matthew is finishing it.
Yes.
This will definitely be fun. And you know, Matthew, I'm so excited because even just looking at your work, which I've seen it before, and obviously because we've chatted before, but you know, I just wanted to check back in and just your beauty work, your celebrity work. I mean, you've got the who's who of Hollywood, it seems, in your portfolio, and not even that, but just the quality of your work as well and your attention to detail. And today is going to be a fun one as we talk about the roles of relationship building. And I'm curious to hear about, you know, how you operate in Japan. But first, we always like to kick it off with our favorite first question. Can you tell us a bit about your background and how you ended up doing what you're doing today?
It was, I guess, in the cards for me. My father gave me a camera early on, like age of 12, and taught me how to process film in the family bathroom. And from that point on, I was hooked. I've been doing it ever since. And, you know, here I am in my, 50s, and I still love it more than ever.
It's funny. And you started in the bathroom. My dad had me. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? My dad got me started in with a contact printer that he'd brought back from his army days, and
Ah,
it was in our laundry room, which had this old beat up refrigerator. And as he's showing me how you put the negative on the box, and you put the photographic paper on top, and you hit the button, and you count to one. I mean, it was so archaic. But what I didn't realize is that when I opened the refrigerator to get myself a Coke, the light, that's how I learned that you can't turn the lights on. There is no safe light or red light.
Oh my goodness. So, how did you end up working your way from the US to Japan? That's very different.
everybody asks that question. What are you doing in Japan, Matthew? What are you doing in Japan? So I'll let you guys in on a secret, 'cause I rarely tell this story. Well, first and foremost, my wife is Japanese, but we had the choice of either living in the States, staying in the States, or being in Japan. And I want to come here because I've been working on a big project for a long time. And I knew to take it to the place where I wanted that project to be, I had to be here. And it's been a wonderful thing all the way around moving here.
You know, we talked about special projects when we were working with you, and we did a podcast with Mind Your Own Business a year or two ago. That focus you have. Let's talk about that for a second, because you are so focused on. You've always got a special project going on. Sorry, everybody. There's no continuity to my thoughts today. You're always focused on a special project in addition to whatever responsibilities you normally have. I mean, you've got a great educational network, especially helping people with lighting. You've got relationships with other companies in the U.S. Who sponsor you. You've got speaking engagements. How have you managed to work in and stay focused on the projects? And what would you say to people who don't have a special project backing them up? Because it seems to be the way that you stay focused so much on your love for photography and imaging.
It absolutely is. I love personal projects. This one is much more than a personal project. It's a big deal. But I every single day before I get started my day, before I end my day, I have these affirmations that I say, and I have them everywhere. Anybody who knows me knows that they're everywhere. They're in my office. They're in the bathroom. So I look at them every single day and repeat my affirmations about my projects, no matter if they're big or small, all the time, every single day. And that's how I stay focused and keep my projects, in the forefront.
How many projects would you say that you have now? Because there are a couple things we've talked about over the years, and I know you might have more than one going on at the same time. And I love the way you manage to juggle them. And one might go to the back burner for a little while, and then it'll move forward as something comes up that's relevant to it. How many projects do you feel you're playing with now that will someday see the light of day?
Well, there's this one main project right now. I have a call after today's podcast with Aretha Franklin's former publicist about doing a book on my images of her. I shot her for like the last 13 years of her life, and that may become a project. I'm just waiting to get the go ahead from the family, basically, to go ahead and do it. But if that does come to life, that'll be another project, and that's a smaller project compared to the other one I'm working on. And it'll be easier because I have all the content already. It's just getting it together. I've met with the publisher already, and they're waiting to hear from Aretha's people. If that happens, then I'll go forward with that one. But the big project is my main focus.
The mention of Aretha, Matthew, I think is very cool. I mean, talk about an awesome woman, a talented woman, a great woman. And the fact that you have worked so closely with her all these years, and now after her passing and keeping that relationship going, that says a lot about you and the value that you place on building relationships, but also maintaining them.
It's all about relationships.
Absolutely. And that's really what I'd like to dig into next. Can you tell us about, how do I phrase this question? How are you building relationships? I guess it's a two-part question. Part one, the process of building relationships in Japan, with your area, but also, so that's part one, how do you build relationships in Japan? But part two would be, how are you maintaining those relationships that you also have overseas, like over here in the U.S.?
It's funny, everybody asks that question a lot. And I must say, before I moved here, I was concerned about maybe losing clients. And yeah, there are small jobs that did go away, but that's really about it. I work just as much now as I did. Actually, no, that's wrong. I work more now since I moved to Japan, which is really funny. Everything's based on relationships. So I just got back from the States a couple of days ago, which is why I'm fighting a cold. So forgive my voice today as I fight this cold still. Just got off the plane. I was there speaking in New York. Then I left speaking, flew to LA, did a shoot of a client who was waiting for me to get back in the States to do a shoot. I've shot her for this other client I've shot for the last, again, maybe 15 years. So she was waiting for me to shoot her. We did the shoot there. Then I flew back to New York, did another job, and then flew back here to Japan.
Oh my goodness.
Before that, the week before I left to start that crazy trip, I had a crazy week here in Japan. So that week started off by having meetings with Sonny Chiba, actually having dinners with Sonny Chiba in regard to doing a project in November for him. He'll be 60 years as an actor in November. For those who don't know Sonny Chiba, he was the sword sensei in Kill Bill, the Tarantino movies. Then the next day, I did a job where I shot for a new client, shooting Angelina Jolie. She was in town, so I shot her the next day. And then the following day, Lenny Kravitz was in town having an exhibit. So the same client wanted me to come to the exhibit to meet him. That was all here in Tokyo. And all based on relationships, building new relationships, and then taking care of old relationships. I'm always in contact with all my clients all the time. And a lot of it is through social media these days, which is funny, through Twitter or through Instagram especially.
It's funny when you talk about keeping in touch. Sheila and I are sitting here watching TV one night and the phone rings, and it was a weird number that I didn't recognize. And I have fun with telemarketers. I cannot deny that I give them the same abuse that they give us. And I picked it up thinking it was telemarketing, and it was Matthew. And Matthew was on his Google International number. And honest to God, Matthew, it sounded like you were right next door. It's no different than the podcast now. And I know I'm an old fart to still be amazed at how we're able to keep contact. But the reality was that it really was, except for the time difference, where your day is just starting and ours was ending. It just wasn't. It wasn't a big deal. I mean, I go back to the days when my mother would yell, "Get off the line! It's a long distance call. It's costing your father money," and that just doesn't happen.
No, not anymore.
No, it's just phenomenal. So, talking about relationship building and keeping in touch, are there some differences you've seen? I've spent a lot of time in Tokyo, not the same quality time as you've been able to have, which I'm envious of. But in terms of keeping in touch and following protocol, what are some of the differences you've seen in the way you work with or are starting to work with local photographers and companies?
Well, in terms of with different companies and clients, everything in Japan is very formal, where in the States, people become very informal right away. So I'm always being cognizant of that. How you greet somebody, how you first enter a meeting, how you present business cards. That formality in business here is very different than in the States. It's interesting going back and forth because I go back to the States about 10 times a year, and doing business here is more of a process of it's not one person making a decision. It's a group mentality here. And I've gotten used to that now. I'm going on my third year here in Japan, and I see that process. It may take more time to get to the yes, but then once the yes happens, it goes forward. And people are very loyal here. Once you get a client, they love you and they'll keep you forever.
It's funny when you said, once you get that yes, one of the things that I learned going back to my Polaroid days was when in a meeting, another Japanese business person says hi, which is yes. It doesn't necessarily mean they agree with you. It just means we're on the same planet.
Exactly.
And I remember negotiating at the time on behalf of Polaroid with the guys from Kanishiroku, and every day we did 3 days of negotiating. Every day it was like starting over. But then there were some incredibly wonderful expressions. When you got to a point where there were too many issues that we were trying to work out at the same time, the translation of the Japanese expression was, there are too many pebbles in the stream. And
yes,
it's all right. So let's step back. So it is a slower process, but you're right. Once the agreement is there, they are committed. So there seems to be a greater focus on the research and development, where in the U.S. it's like, all right, full steam ahead. Let's just go for it.
Yes, yes.
And then there's the line about, what is it about jump and the net will appear or something like that. They make sure the net is there.
Yes.
So when you do finally
like
get
that.
when you do finally get that commitment, it's absolutely there. And I love your comment about loyalty, because in the US, I just feel like people have so many choices, and you're constantly going through sort of your own version of buyer's remorse. So you make a decision and then you backstep. Oh, did I do the right thing? And you start to check and confirm.
Yes.
Where in Japan, if they've made the decision, they've already gone through that process.
True.
I didn't mean to get on a soapbox here, everybody, but it's an amazing country, and I am a little bit envious. But I just came up with a great idea as you were talking. We're going to do a contest. This is going to be a Beyond Technique contest to guess how many miles Matthew has in his flight account.
Well, I will say this year I've broken a record.
Ooh.
Wow.
Ooh.
I remember making platinum years ago on Continental Airlines and being very excited until I realized that I'd given up 63% of my life to get those points.
Yeah, yeah. But I'll say this, my entire career I've been traveling quite a bit, and it was much harder flying from New York to LA doing that. I did that for many years, back and forth there. It was much harder doing that than it is now. It's much more enjoyable going from Tokyo to LA or Tokyo to New York than once I get in the States. Even this past trip, flying to the States, that was easy. But once I got to the States, flying around inside of America was much more difficult. So I definitely like it now, much better.
Well, it's almost as if you've got more control.
More control, more relaxed, more respect. There's just so many different things about the international flight that changes your life, and it just makes it less stressful. And I love that about it. Number one, you're in a lounge every time you're flying, which is a big difference. You're in a bigger plane. It's more space, and yes, I'm the top level now, so that definitely helps quite a bit. But even without that, just having the respect that happens from Japan's side coming to the States, it's a big difference.
Interesting. So cool. So one of my favorite things about this podcast is that we talk about more than just photography technique. Hence the name Beyond Technique. There's so much more that goes into running a successful photography business besides the gear, the equipment that you're using, relationship building that we've covered. That's huge. And so I'm curious, Matthew, are there any, trends that you're noticing either over in Japan or here in the States or around the world Are there trends that you are seeing that photographers are struggling with as far as building a successful business? Have you noticed anything?
Oh, good question. Trends. It's funny, here in Tokyo, I see a lot of young photographers with film cameras, which kind of blows me away. Even yesterday, I saw this young photographer walking around with a big, RZ 6x7 camera, and I was like, oh my God, it was bigger than him almost. But I've seen that a lot here. Now, Japan is very tech oriented. Not that we are in the States also, because we are in the States as well, but it is definitely a big part of life here. I think photographers in the States can be more creative. We may not have the barriers that a lot of photographers here have. But in terms of trends right now, I can't think of any one trend that stands out to me a lot. I will say this, though. I know there's a lot of concern about smartphones and how that's affected the industry, and we're hearing a lot about that from all over. You're seeing companies making changes like Profoto coming out with a light specifically for smartphone photographers or smartphone creators. I think photography is going through this evolution, which is not a surprise. It's always been an evolution. I've seen that happen a lot throughout my career, and this is another evolution that's happening for sure.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because one of the things that's still universal, in spite of the fact of, there's a concern because smartphones keep getting better. I recently ran a blog post by a photographer who was a guest at a wedding and did an outstanding little video on his, I guess it's the iPhone 11 Max. Does that sound right? Is that the new model? If it's not,
I'm not an iPhone user.
But he did this outstanding video. But to me, the point wasn't that he could capture it on his phone. It was the fact that it still took his skill set and his skills as an artist and his understanding of video and storytelling to put it all together. So from my perspective, the challenge that the new phones and the technology is creating, to me, is putting more pressure on the camera manufacturers. And the reality is that if we got to a point where the whole world, especially professionally, was photographing everything on phones, on that technology, we would still have that solid foundation that it still takes an artist that knows how to tell the story. It still takes, Matthew, if you look at your background in lighting especially, you could be out there with an old Polaroid S670. It wouldn't make any difference, because the quality of your image in terms of the way you're going to set up the shot, the composition, understanding the lighting, everything that you're going to do, create that to create that shot still requires the skill set of an artist. So I get kind of crazed when I've seen it at photographic schools, for example, where parents are worried about kids that are going to become photographers because, well, the world isn't going to need them anymore because look at technology. But technology doesn't replace artistic skills.
And it never has.
Boy, that took me a long time to get out.
That's all right. It has always been about the vision, and it always will be about the vision of the artist. Whatever tool we are using, it will be about the artist and how they use that vision. So I'm not concerned about the smartphone destroying photography. I don't believe that at all, or anything close to that. When we hear some numbers, we have to think about what the smartphone has done. It has taken away those point and shoot cameras. And that was a big part of the consumer cameras. But in terms of the pro cameras, that's not as far of a decline as people may think. And what it's doing is maybe weeding out some of the people who are not serious photographers, maybe putting their toe into the water for a little bit. But it will always come down to your vision and how you see the world and how you use your camera, your lights, your gear, your tools to create your shots.
I have a theory on people that worry about stuff like that. I think it's genetic. If you go back through their family history, you'll find that their great great grandfather was upset because color imaging came in and screwed up the black and white world. And then the next generation came along and manual focus was being replaced by autofocus, and they were upset. And then you've got another generation that comes along where digital replaced analog. Now you've got 4 generations out, and you've got people that are worried about, photography is just disappearing because of cell phones.
Not at all.
Yeah,
Not at all.
Yeah, there's my theory on genetics and people that worry about that. The real thing is that you provide an incredible level of help to photographers to keep that creative level going and to keep pushing the edge of the envelope.
And I love doing all that and more. I love teaching photography. I love, shooting. I will always do that. And I love pushing the boundaries to go beyond where it's been. You mentioned about, how people feel about changes happening. Not to give anything away, but I've been studying the evolution of photography for the last decade as I've been working on my project, because that's part of my project is the evolution. And, when photography first came about in, 1826, people were scared that it would kill painting for painters and think that they would all change and it was done. That didn't happen. It was just another form of a visual art form. And we're seeing the evolution of it changing again. Is it going to change and kill photography? Not at all. It will be another evolution, as it should be.
You're absolutely right. And no matter how much change happens with technology, with photography technology, the fact of the matter is, one thing that will always help us stand out, and you do this wonderfully, is your vision, Matthew, and even understanding your client. I mean, I love the story of Aretha and the yellow roses that you sent her way back when to build that relationship. I mean, you studied her, you knew what she loved, and before you had taken a single image of her, you were building that relationship. And that's huge.
Absolutely. It always is. I met a client last week while I was in New York for the first time, and she mentioned to me how she loves koi fish. So I'm looking for different things to now send as a gift to just build that relationship. And you're always finding little things out that can help you get a connection with a person on a person to person level, not even think about business, but just creating this friendship.
Absolutely.
When that happens, when you build a friendship, you build a client and you have that client for life. That's how I've had a career all these years.
And I'm assuming you're still doing that in Japan as well. That still applies. Absolutely more than ever. How cool is that? And do you have, I guess, I'm curious, any interesting, a story that you can share from Japan that demonstrates how you did that? Are there any differences in Japan versus the U.S.?
Yeah, gift giving is a big part of life here. I think all Asia, period. Even the subcontinent, India, everybody, there's a bigger emphasis on giving gifts.
Interesting.
And I see that happening. I see how it happens. I see how people react. I see how the culture gives different, tokens or gifts throughout the year. And that affects relationships, even to the point of how companies have, during the cherry blossom season, companies have these picnics under the cherry blossom trees, and people really get together and have a great time. And that's building relationships, building friendships, all throughout doing all of this. Dinners are big. Dinners are big in the States, of course, also. But dinners here are also a very big part of business. And I'm always out because now I'm still somewhat new in Japan. It's been 3 years, but I'm still building these relationships. And a lot of that happens at dinner. And those things happen. The job I did recently here, it was all from relationships, being out, meeting people, and that turning into a job. I have a meeting on Thursday, actually. And here we are Tuesday here now. I have a meeting on Thursday where I'm meeting with a lawyer based on a conversation I had with somebody else. The dinner I had with Sonny Chiba, that was based on a conversation I had with an artist in the States.
You know, one of the things that I remember hearing about and saw it is there's a definitely, we talked about gift giving. There's also the gift giving ties back over into customer service. I remember the manager of the Polaroid office the first time I was there, and this is a long time ago, and he had bought a TV locally, and the television set was defective. There was something that happened that night. They contacted the retailer that he bought it from. The manager apologized and said, well, let's get you another set right away. But then in addition to that, the manager of the store showed up at his door that evening with a cake as a gift just to say, we're sorry. Now, I'm trying to picture somebody from Best Buy showing up at my door with a box of Danish and a bottle of wine to say, we're really sorry that that you had to bring your television back. There's such a huge focus on customer service, but that goes back to what you've been saying all along in terms of it's relationship building. And as big a country and as populated, for example, as especially Tokyo is, they still will always find the time to focus on that relationship between the store and the consumer, or like in your case, the photographer and the subject, and it goes back to that loyalty. But obviously, everybody can tell I have loved every trip I've ever made to Japan. It's a remarkable place.
And here we are talking about relationships. All of this is building relationships. The customer service that you get here is helping me build my business in a different way and how I react and how I make it special. One thing I love about being here is coming to the States, doing the assignment, and then bringing some small little gift that's the token of just like saying, oh, thank you for the work. The job I shot last week in LA, I brought a small mirror from Japan. I was photographing a woman, and they make these beautiful small mirrors. So I gave her that as a gift, and she was just so over the top, happy with that one little mirror. She's written me 3 emails about that mirror. That's a beautiful Japanese mirror, number one. It's special. But it's, it wasn't really expensive. It's small, but it's just that little small token that takes you to another place in terms of business and relationships and clients and all of that.
But I think about how American photographers could learn from that and do more. I mean, one of the things that Sarah Petty and I have had a lot of conversations about the importance of handwritten notes because they're back. We live in an internet world. It's still personal, but it's a little impersonal when you just send somebody an email to say thanks, and that's fine. But then there are people that you want to build a stronger relationship, and that just that little handwritten note can mean so much. Well, that's something that where you are now in Japan is regularly done. And it goes, when you start to think about how much stronger a photographer's business could be in this country if they would just pay attention to birthdays, anniversaries, ways to keep in touch, even a children family photographer, keeping track of your clients and how the kids are growing and keeping in touch. That loyalty we've talked about is a two-way street. So as an artist, reinforcing that loyalty to your target audience is very similar. So
here's one more thing that I do that's special, I think. In Japan, there are holidays that are not in the States and vice versa. But sometimes I'll send a little card or a photo signed that's a holiday in Japan to a client in the States. And even though that holiday is not taking place in the States, it's just a way for me to get my name in front of them again and just say, oh, I'm thinking about you.
It's a never-ending ability to remind your clients that you care.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't really even need an excuse. Just, you use it as, okay, This is a holiday in Japan, so you're like almost giving a part of my life, here, and also doing like networking.
I love it.
Oh, we've done too many of these. Hey, am I right? Am I right? We're kind of down to the wire.
Yeah, we're coming up on our time here.
Well, let's hit him with our favorite last question.
All right. So, Matthew, we love this question because it's just a down-to-earth question. For many of our listeners who may be just starting out in photography, do you have any advice for new photographers just starting out as far as building a sustainable long-term business?
Absolutely. My advice to anyone who's new, or actually anybody who's just trying to get their business going where they've been doing it for, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, is to understand that you have your own fingerprint, your own way of seeing life. If you stay with that and don't get lost in the noise of trying to be like everybody else, you will be successful. If we think about a fingerprint, nobody in the world has the same fingerprint. That's what makes you special. How you view life, how you see the world. And if you put that into your photography, into your work, your view of life, your view of how you see people, a portrait, you'll be successful and you'll stand out. In the same way, your fingerprint is different, your work will be different.
Great advice.
No one can take that away from you. Oh, that's perfect.
Great advice.
Oh my goodness. This has been amazing. This is better than multiple cups of caffeine right now on this Tuesday morning for me. It's so inspiring. And I want to make sure our listeners check out your work because your work is just unbelievable. Where can they find you online?
Definitely on Instagram is probably the best place today. Of course, my website as well. Matthew Jordan Smith on Instagram. MatthewJordansmith.com is my website. Always evolving, changing. It'll be changing quite a bit in the next year. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, exciting. Exciting. And Skip, where can folks get in touch with you?
It's always the same. It's Skip Cohen on Twitter, Skip Cohen on Facebook. My email is skip@mei500.com. We want to get your feedback and any ideas or requests you've got for guests that you might want us to have on Beyond Technique. And also everything that I write is on skipcohenuniversity.com every day, along with, you'll see Shamira's name there a lot lately too, because she's helping and being very involved in SCU. And Shamira, where are they going to go to find you?
Folks can send me an email at shamira@photofocus.com. That's my first name, CHAMIRA @photofocus.com. Yes, please send us your questions, ideas, feedback. If there's anyone that you'd like to have us talk to on the show, interview on the show, we absolutely want to hear what you all have to say, because it drives how we move forward with this show. And we love having amazing guests such as you, Matthew. We want to thank you again. This has been amazing.
Thank you. Sorry about my cold today. I definitely sound like I'm more nasally than normal for sure. So sorry about that, but it's been a pleasure being here.
Well, we're going to sell this soundtrack to one of the decongested companies.
A new sponsor.
Pills you need to take before you fly.
Definitely something.
Yeah. By the way, the other fun thing about this and your background, Matthew, and also the Beyond Technique podcast, Shamira and I are both having a lot of fun working with the crew and the team over at Platypod.
Yes.
And Platypod is, I don't want this to sound like an infomercial, but Platypod is all about unique angles and perspectives. So it just kind of fits with Beyond Technique and talking about things other than exposure and composition and capture and post-processing. So it's a lot of fun to be able to do.
Absolutely. And we want to thank our listeners for joining us as well. Please tell your friends about this podcast, especially if they have the burning desire to improve their photography business. We look forward to having you with us next time on Beyond Technique, brought to you by Platypod, Photofocus, and Skip Cohen University.